How's everybody doing tonight? Let's give a big round of applause to our candidates here. And a big round of applause for the public library. We love the library for hosting this event. We were very happy they weren't booked. We thought this debate was overdue. All right, I'll stop that. All right, so we're just gonna here's the kind of the game plan tonight. We're gonna be trying to hear from our candidates as much as humanly possible. So let's start with a sound check. Can you each just say your names so to make sure your mics work?
Tony Evers.
Matt Flynn.
Mike McCabe.
Kelda Royce.
Josh Pade.
Tony Stark.
Kathleen Bynag.
Another new candidate.
So what we're going to be hearing from is our moderators are going to be posing questions that have been individualized for each of the candidates. And then as you see, candidates, we have cards that you guys can hold up. You can hold up if you want to jump in on somebody else's card when they're done speaking. So we'll explain that again after that. So, all right, well, we got about 3.5 awkward minutes of talking quietly, all right? So I'll give you guys a 1 minute, and then we'll get going right at 7 o'clock. So thank you for being here. Thank you, candidates. It should be a good forum. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Payne and Royce. Yeah. Yeah. We're doing it in alphabetical order.
That's because Dylan told him he was in the fifth
Huh?
seat. Because Dylan told him he was in the fifth seat.
Oh, okay. Well, it probably would have, because he didn't have Mitchell gone.
Yeah, I know, but
Yeah.
why you got it wrong?
Okay, Amy. We need to get her out. You guys got to get.
You got to get her out?
I mean, she's.
Oh.
Well, do you want them to do? No. No. Oh my God.
Really? They go to Tony?
It's ridiculous.
He's the front runner. Let's get him.
You know what these spikes are? Did you just say that's ridiculous?
Maybe.
Let's not worry about it. It's too late.
But my censors wouldn't allow it.
Or your wife.
In downtown Madison. This is the final debate for the 2018 Democratic candidates for Wisconsin governor. All right, good evening. My name is Dylan Brogan. I'm from Madison's weekly newspaper, Isthmus. Our panel of journalists posing questions to our candidates tonight are Molly Stentz, news director for WORT 89.9 FM. Bill Lueders, managing editor of the Progressive magazine. And Judith Davidoff, editor of Isthmus. So before we start, what's a Democratic candidate for governor's favorite Shakespeare play? Macbeth, because of that line in Act 5. Out, damn Scott, out! Joking is over now, folks. All right, let's introduce our candidates on stage tonight as they appear in alphabetical order. Wisconsin State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Evers. Former chair of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin, Matt Flynn. Former executive director of the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign, Mike McCabe. Attorney Josh Payne. Former state representative Kelda Royce. Madison Mayor Paul Soglin. And State Senator Kathleen Vinehout. Let's give them a round of applause, folks. So our the eighth candidate in this race, professional firefighter Wisconsin Union President Malin Mitchell, informed us yesterday that he is unable to attend. But we do have a packed, stacked crowd, if you will, at the Central Library tonight. But we ask that you hold your applause until the very end of the debate because our time is short. So here is the plan for this evening. We will have 4 rounds of questions tonight in which each candidate will have 1 minute to answer. However, each candidate will have 5 opportunities to provide a 30-second response to a question posed to another candidate or that candidate's response. We'll keep track of that with these color-coded cards. So, candidates, if you want to respond to a question that was not asked directly of you, just raise one of those cards and I will call on you to speak. After you use the card, please set it on the ground and no cheating. There will be 3 lightning rounds, which I will moderate, and the cards will not be used during these. If a candidate is mentioned by another candidate, I may allow a short rebuttal if clarification is needed. If a panelist feels that the substance of a question has not been addressed, we will ask for a follow-up. Our first question tonight is from Molly Stentz from WORT and is for State Superintendent Evers.
Good evening, Superintendent Evers. Public polls show you as the front runner among the Democratic gubernatorial candidates, yet a third of primary voters remain uncommitted, and the election's only a week away. Why do you think there are so many undecided voters?
Well, do I have a microphone that's working here? Well, first of all, I want to thank you and our moderator and the thankless job of timekeepers for doing your great job. And also, we're getting towards the end of the campaign, as you had mentioned. I just want to have a shout out for all the candidates here. They've done a great job and people with great ideas, and I've loved working with them. So, yes, I am ahead in the polls, and the most recent Marquette poll had me 25 points ahead of the rest of the field. But the bottom line is, and you hit the nail on the head, there's a lot of undecideds out there, and with this many candidates in the race, this race has become and always was around retail politics. That's why we all crisscross the state. That's why we all try to build relationships with individual voters or larger groups of individual voters. This is about retail politics. That's the way I've run my race right from the beginning. That's why I believe I will win this race next week. Thank you.
All right, Representative Royce, you wanted to jump in here for 30 seconds?
Yes, thank you. I think there are so many undecided voters in this race because we have 8 great candidates. And it's a testament to the fact that so many of us care deeply about what's happening in our state, that we want to do our research. And that's important and admirable. So I want to urge everyone to go to our websites, minuskeldaforgovernor.com, do that research. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we need to make sure we have a candidate who is ready to govern, shares our progressive values, and can beat Scott Walker. That's what this is about, and that's why I'm here.
Thank you. Our next question is for Mr. Flynn.
Mr. Flynn, you represented the Archdiocese of Milwaukee regarding the alleged sexual abuse of children by priests. Let's agree that there is nothing wrong with an attorney zealously representing a client. But your critics allege that you failed to notify authorities of abuse allegations, helped transfer accused priests to other parishes, and negotiated agreements with victims that forbade them from discussing what happened. Are any of these things true?
These are lies. Let me put it this way. I'm a partner at Quarles & Brady. It's a reputable firm, and I have the highest reputation myself. We've represented the Archdiocese of Milwaukee for more than 50 years, and when these cases came along, our job was to clean it up. Our job was to enter into settlements for compensation therapy with the victims of these terrible crimes. We could not go back in time to undo what had happened. I did not represent the priests. They had their own lawyers, and they deserved to go to prison, the ones that did. But the Republican Party started this line of attack in October, and then it was taken up recently by others as well. And the fact is that we settled, we cleared it up, we cleaned it up. I didn't transfer anybody. I was not part of transferring anybody. That had been done by the Archdiocese up till about the early 90s. And they're simply flat-out lies. So I'm here to say that.
What about the secrecy pacts? Are you saying that there was never a negotiated settlement that included a confidentiality provision?
It's common in all settlement agreements to have a confidentiality provision
So that
that, wait a minute, that can be waived at the election of the victim. Not us. Do you understand that? Not us. The victim can waive it, and in most cases they didn't want to waive it because they sued as John Doe. You see what I mean? John Doe, Jane Doe. They didn't want their names out there. So we put that in. If they want to waive it, God bless them, they can waive it. We can't waive it. Do you understand? Thank you.
Our next question is for Mr. McCabe.
Mr. McCabe, you almost did not run as a Democrat, and it's safe to say you are not favored by the party establishment. How can you win without having the full support of your party, as Scott Walker will have from his? And would you tell the Democratic governor?
All right, let's just have you repeat the question.
All right. Again, Mr. McCabe, you almost did not run as a Democrat, and it's safe to say you are not favored by the party establishment. How can you win without having the full support of your party, as Scott Walker will have from his? And would you tell the Democratic Governors Association and other outside groups not to spend money on your behalf in the general election?
I can win by getting more votes than Scott Walker gets and getting the support of the people of Wisconsin. And look, I haven't been a member of a political party over the course of my life. I was an independent watchdog for much of my adult life and worked to expose big money influence in politics and corruption in our government. That work put me in a position of calling out Democrats and Republicans when I saw wrongdoing or unethical behavior. I certainly don't make any apologies for that work. In fact, I'm very proud of it. And the bottom line is what we have to do is go out to the people of Wisconsin and convince them that Wisconsin can pursue a better direction, that we can be more as a state, that we can do better as a state. And when we do that, regardless of party affiliation, when we do that, the people of Wisconsin will respond because they want a government that works for all of us and not simply a wealthy, well-connected, and privileged few at the very top.
Thank you. Please all respond, stand. Mr. Payne, let's just see if your microphone works right there before the next question. Just say your name quick for me.
Josh Payne.
All right, it does. All right, our next question is for you.
According to a recent Marquette Law School poll, your approval rating hovers around 0%. Why are you in this race, and why did you choose to run for governor as an entry point into politics?
Thank you. I didn't get into this race, and I'm not continuing this race based on a single poll. And that was a poll that also shows numbers of people are undecided. I got into this race, and it wasn't a starting point for my political advocacy. I've worked in public policy. I've worked in the public and the private sector across the state of Wisconsin. And I got into this race because going around to all the places that I've worked, people I've worked with, I've in the grocery business. I've bagged their groceries. I've worked in their communities. I've worked with their local governments, and they're ready for a change. They're ready for a new chapter in Wisconsin politics, a new vision that brings back Wisconsin heritage of being that laboratory of democracy, the place where great progressive ideas are brought into the discussion in the marketplace. That's why I got in this race, because I'm passionate about it. And I want to bring these ideas and fight for them. And that's what we need if we want to actually win in November and win for families across Wisconsin.
Thank you. Our next question is for Mayor Soglin. Oh, I'm sorry. What's wrong with me? For Representative Royce.
Thank you. I could let him answer for me.
Well, he'll have an opportunity to jump in if he wants, so we'll see. I believe this one is from you, Judy?
Yes, Representative Royce. You antagonized many progressive voters with your negative campaigning against Representative Mark Pocan in the 2012 race for Congress. You have said you've learned lessons from that experience. What are those lessons?
Well, for one thing, don't go up against a well-loved great progressive in a primary for an open seat. But also, I think, we do need to be really careful about what we say and how it's portrayed. I made a mistake in that race by running negative ads. I had disagreements with him that were policy disagreements, but they were minor in the grand scheme of things. And since the day that primary ended, and frankly, even before it started, I consider him a friend, a colleague, and I've been a strong supporter of his. He's done a great job for us in Congress, and I think that that's what we need. We have to be able to disagree with each other on policy as Democrats, as progressives, and if we want to move this country forward. There are those of us on this stage right now who have policy disagreements, but how we talk about those policy disagreements really, really matters. And that's one of the things that I think has been great about this race. We've been able to talk about those differences while keeping our eye on the ball, which is beating Scott Walker.
Thank you. This next question is for Mayor Soglin.
Mayor Soglin, you've been one of the most vocal and at times harshest critics of Republicans in the state legislature. Yet it's very likely that the GOP will remain in the party of control in November. How will you be able to work with that party that you frequently vilified?
I don't think that a criticism that's leveled at people who've made a mistake is necessarily going to stop progress in terms of doing what's in the best public policy interest for the people of this state. And I will give one example, and that's Robin Vos. Yes, I've been critical of his leadership. I've been critical of his party. I've been very critical of Assembly Republicans. But there is a point of common agreement. Robin Vos and many in this room, as well as myself, agree on the importance of having a regional transit authority. Regional transit authorities that are needed in Madison and the other metropolitan areas of the state. One of the things that we can do is find that common ground, and I am the only candidate of all of us who has continually articulated that I will appoint a Republican to my cabinet. I don't know if Dale Schultz is interested, but I'll certainly look to him for advice.
All right, and I see that Mr. Flynn wants to jump in here for 30 seconds.
Right. And I have a friendly disagreement with Paul Soglin, who I view as a friend. I think he's a good mayor. I do not believe that you can accommodate certain people. Donald Trump is one of them. Donald Trump has betrayed us to the Russians for bribery and blackmail. I don't think that you can accommodate Scott Walker. I think he'll have you for lunch if you try to accommodate him. There are good Republicans. There are very few of them. I know who they are. But I think we need a much firmer approach with these people than we've seen before.
Senator Vinehouse.
Thank you, Dylan. I strongly believe that the best way to work with people is to respect them and treat them with dignity. No matter how much we disagree, we need to bring civility back to politics. And that's exactly what we've been able to do in the legislature, especially on the Audit Committee and the Agriculture Committee. We managed to get 70% of the legislature on both sides of the aisle, when I was chair of the Ag Committee, to pass a raw milk bill that allowed consumer protection and direct sales of raw milk. It can be done.
All right, well, let's move on to our next question, which happens to be from Senator Vinehouse, too. So, Bill?
Senator Vinehouse, you have called the goal of cutting the state's prison population in half absolutely doable. Department of Corrections stats show that 66% of state prison inmates have committed a violent offense. Do you concede that achieving this reduction goal will mean releasing some inmates convicted of violent offenses. How do you intend to get to half of our current population?
No, I do not. And that number, 66%, came from 2016, and it came from the DOC's own reports. It is incredibly important that we have nonpartisan, unbiased information on what's happening in DOC, which is why I advocated for and voted for a comprehensive audit of the Department of Corrections. We need to know, for example, how many of those people are in there for crimeless revocations. We don't know. How many of those people were assisting a crime but never actually committed a violent act? We don't know. How many of those people were diagnosed severe mental illness or developmentally disabled? We don't know. We don't know how those books are cooked. And until I see the data and until I see exactly where that information is coming from, I don't believe it. We need the information, and we need it from a nonpartisan source, and it will be here going into the next budget.
Mayor Soglin, 30 seconds.
I would think that every one of us, whether whoever is elected governor, is going to do exactly what Kathleen Vinehout outlined. Every single prisoner's record has to be reviewed in terms of the time that they've been incarcerated, the nature of the accused offense, as well as if there was a plea agreement. In addition, the nature of their behavior, and then we will know. It may be less than half, it may be more than half. That's not the point. The point is justice needs to be done, and we have to stop wasting lives and money.
Thank you. And Mr. McCabe?
Let me tell you why it's realistic and achievable to have the goal of cutting our prison population in half. All you have to do is look across the border to the west, and there's Minnesota, which imprisons half as many people as Wisconsin, and yet our two states have virtually identical crime rates. Locking up twice as many people as Wisconsin has not reduced crime. It has only left us with a state budget that spends more on prisons than the entire university system. That is not tough on crime. That is dumb on crime.
Superintendent Evers?
And I have to just weigh in on this topic just for a minute because Scott Walker
Go for
weighed
30
in
seconds.
yesterday big time. But you think about this. We have the governor of the state of Wisconsin saying he is never going to go to a prison. This is the leader of Wisconsin. That is just, we have thousands and thousands of people working in the system, lots of people incarcerated. The governor has to be there. He has to talk to these people.
Representative Royce, 30 seconds.
Well, this is a huge topic, not just for our state budget, but because the greatest shame of our state is our persistent racial disparities. And the fact is, Wisconsin has the worst racial disparities in the nation in our criminal justice system, as well as in other areas like education and health where we see disparities. So we have got to do something about this if we want to stop being the worst place to be a black child in this country. I'm being attacked by Scott Walker, but I'm excited to get to work in the Department of Corrections to make sure that we're getting smart on crime, as all of my candidates for governor agree.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn?
Yes. My action items on this are as follows. I will legalize marijuana for all purposes, medicinal, recreational, tax it and regulate it for people over 21. And I will pardon anybody in our prison or jail system who's there for a non-violent possession offense, including people off paper, so that their records are cleaned up. I would also get rid of solitary confinement, except in most egregious circumstances for limited periods of time. I think it's a form of torture. And I think we need a hands-on governor who goes to the prisons a lot to make sure the guards are protected and that the inmates are protected.
Thank you. Mr. Payne, you're the only one on stage who didn't go ahead and say
No,
one of your cards.
I was one of my cards. Thank you. I agree with everyone on this stage. I mean, we need real criminal justice reform here in the state. A couple things to add is that, first of all, we need to stop the pipeline of putting all these people in prison. And that begins with holding our prosecutors accountable for how they're conducting their job. There was a recent report I just read about that when you put accountability on prosecutors, then they will behave in the right way. And the second thing is to make sure that we are caring for people that come out of prison to get them back into society and have a robust program for that. I've done some work with Defy Vouchers on bringing entrepreneurship.
Thank you. All right, so that brings us to our first lightning round. These are questions in which I'll ask the candidates to raise a hand to indicate their position. So if you support it, just raise your hand. If there's an outlier in the group, we might ask for a very brief explanation. So Here we go, and Mr. Flynn kind of started us off early on this one. So, who here supports the legalization of marijuana for recreational use by adults? Show of hands if you support it. So every candidate on the stage. All right, that was easy. Who supports requiring background checks on all gun sales? That's all hands again. Who supports raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour within the next governor's term in office? Mr. McCabe, would you like 30 seconds to explain?
The plan I put forward actually increases the minimum wage over the course of 5 years, which is not within the first term. And I think it has to be done not only to get to $15 an hour, but then automatically adjusting that wage for inflation beyond that 5-year period.
All right, thank you. Mr. Payne, you did not raise your hand either?
Yeah, I mean, I do agree that we need to get to $15, but have a smart way on getting there and partner with local businesses, and then adjust it for inflation. But importantly, when we consider the timeline, we should allow larger municipalities that have a higher cost of living to get there faster than the rest of the state. So Madison and Milwaukee should be allowed to set their own minimum wage that could be higher than the statewide minimum wage.
Next question, show of hands. Who here would work to repeal so-called right-to-work laws affecting private sector unions? Every candidate on the stage. Who supports freezing UW tuition in the next budget, as Governor Walker has promised to do? All right, Mr. Payne, you're the only candidate to raise his hand. Why would you freeze tuition at UW?
So I'm not against freezing tuition, but we need to look at the total cost of college. And
so you're just not guaranteeing it in their next budget?
So I think we should guarantee it in the next budget, along with reinvesting money.
Well,
into
get out
the
of here.
university
You said
system.
you didn't put your hand up. So you do support. Okay.
Wait, did you? I'm sorry, I heard you wrong. Did you say support or not support?
Yeah, who supports? Maybe we got to do this again. Who supports freezing UW tuition in the next budget?
Oh, I support freezing tuition.
Oh, good. All right. Mayor Soglin has said he would raise taxes to pay for public schools.
I'm sorry.
Is there anyone here who would refuse to do that?
Say that again.
Refused?
That's a double negative.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
Dylan.
Mayor Soglin has said he would raise taxes to pay for public schools. Is there anyone here who would refuse to do that?
Yeah.
All right, how about we give every candidate quickly 15 seconds to explain their position on that. Can we go down the line? Is that fair for everybody? Mr. Evers?
Yeah, well, here's the deal. Yes, we need more money for our public schools. I would never disagree with that. But whether it's tax increases or whether it's looking at tax credits that we give out to very, very wealthy people in the state, we have to look at all the issues. It can't just, the only thing cannot be just a tax hike.
Mr. Flynn?
Look, I'm going to get rid of Foxconn, get the $1 billion back for Medicaid, the $800 for train money, and get rid of the manufacturers and agriculture exemption. That's where the money is going to come for public education, not from raised taxes.
Mr. McCabe?
Wisconsin's been trying to fund two separate and parallel systems of education and hasn't been doing justice by one. I favor ending taxpayer-subsidized private schooling, which has siphoned resources away from public schools, putting that money back into community schools rather than weakening them by taking that funding away.
Mr. Payne?
So I've long been an advocate for tax reform that provides relief to the middle class and makes Wisconsin a progressive tax state again. And also just it's about budget priorities. We just talked about prison reform. We spend $1 billion a year on prisons. If we reduce that population, then we have more money for schools. We talked about legalization of marijuana. If we legalize marijuana, we will get a lot of revenue that can be used to pay for schools.
Representative Royce?
We have a lot of money that is being wasted on corporate giveaways and tax credits for people and corporations that don't need it. That's the first place we need to look to shore up our budget. But one of the first and key priorities of the state is funding our public education system. And that means not just enough money, but that the money is allocated in a way that is fair, that is based on the needs of the kids in the district right now, not the archaic formula. And finally, public money is for public schools, period.
Mayor Soglin?
Let's cut the crap. That's one of the words we can't say. If you're going to spend more money on schools, you've got to spend more tax money. That's all there is to it. Now, one thing I would want to do as part of that, two things. One is reduce the local reliance on the property tax. That's what's breaking the back in the smaller communities. And replace it with either income or sales tax. The second thing that needs to be done is the formula for school funding must be changed. It's outrageous that wealthy suburbs can get almost as much money, or if not more, than poorer communities in this state. That must be fixed.
Senator Bynum.
I've written 4 alternatives to the governor's budget, showing in each one of them how to change the school funding formula with the same state dollars in the budget. It's very important that we go in there and say, hey, it's a question of priorities. Do we have the money? Yes, we have the money, but we can't spend $464 million on the Foxconn first budget payment. The money is there, but we need to rearrange the priorities.
Thank you. All right, show of hands on this one. How many of you think you are the only Democratic candidate on this stage who can beat Governor Scott Walker? Maybe I gotta ask that again. So if you're the only candidate, there's no other candidate on this stage?
That's correct.
All right, so every candidate raised their hand there, I guess.
I didn't raise my
Except for
hand.
Mayor Soglin.
No.
Okay, well then,
I'm the outline. I get to talk.
Mayor Soglin. Mayor
Well,
Soglin?
very simply, I know I can beat him, but that isn't to exclude the possibility that other good candidates here could defeat him as well. And all of us, except for Mike McCabe, have already made the commitment that no matter who gets the nomination, we will solidly support that candidate. And I, for one, will tell you there'll be no strings attached. I'm not going to anybody here, if I'm not the candidate, and saying we have to make a deal. It is unequivocal. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, I agree.
Mr. McCabe, you were brought up there. You want a quick 15-second response to that?
I can tell you this, I'm not voting for Scott Walker. We need a new governor and we need a new direction for our state. I just think it's a mistake to make party loyalty pledges. I think it sends a message to the voters of Wisconsin that party comes before everything. It comes before the people, it comes before country or state. And that's a message that is a huge turnoff to the very voters that we need to win over in order to get a new governor. We have to go to them and say, here's our vision for how to make Wisconsin stronger and be able to make this the state that it has the potential to be. That's our job, not to simply say, whoever's got a D behind the name, that's our choice.
Thank you, Mr. McCabe. Representative Royce?
Well, I think it's interesting that the women on stage didn't raise their hands, and Paul Soglin, because
Good company.
we understand that all of us are on the same team, and we have to collaborate. And everyone in this room is on the same team. We have to collaborate if we want to make sure we have a new governor. I think I'm the strongest candidate to beat Scott Walker because I have been energizing progressive voters all across the state, people who would otherwise stay home, because I can get the young voters, and by young I mean voters under 50, Gen Xers and millennials, out to vote like our baby boomer friends do. And because we can win if we get the real swing voters in Wisconsin, which are these suburban married women that voted for Walker 3 times, but they care about public education, they care about ending gun violence, and they care about reproductive rights. All issues on which I am the strongest candidate.
Thank you. And Senator Beinhoff?
I think that I am the best candidate to beat the governor because we have to win in parts of the state that I represent and have won in 3 times. 3 times I have won in a district that Scott Walker has won in all of his races, in a district that Trump has won, in a county that my county went almost 70% for Trump. So we can't beat Scott Walker as much as folks here would love to. We can't beat him with just the vote from Madison and Milwaukee. We need the rest of the state to beat him.
Thank you, Senator. And now we move on to our next round of questions. We'll start with a question for Superintendent Evers from Judy Davidoff, editor of Isthmus.
Hi.
Superintendent Evers.
Hi.
Political and cultural observers are increasingly tying voter apathy and citizen ignorance about government to the fact that schools no longer spend sufficient time on civics. What do Wisconsin schools require in this regard, and do you think it's adequate?
No, it's not. I would support requiring citizenship or civics. Clearly, somebody asked me today about what is the most important thing about our public schools and what do I want young people to do. I want them to be good adults. I want them to be successful adults. And in order to do that, they have to have citizenship. They have to have civics. What's preventing it, frankly, is money. And we've talked about all sorts of different plans. I have just released most of my budget, $600 million more for special education, which will impact positively all kids in the state of Wisconsin. We will be going to 2/3 funding this next time around. This is a funding issue. Districts do not have the money in order to implement new mandates. This is a critical one. If we want our next generation to actually understand what fake news is versus not fake news and be good voters, not necessarily Republicans or Democrats, but good adults, citizens of society, we need to have that requirement. We need money to make that happen.
Thank you. Are you raising a card there, anyone? Nope. Oh, yep, Mayor Seidlin. All right. Raise it high.
I do want to concur in that we should have civics classes. We should have classes on American institutions. And it's got to come from textbooks that are not dictated by the Texas School Board. Sanitized versions of American history. They have to tell the truth. They have to tell the succession of bias and race in this country that goes all the way back to the first time explorers arrived here. But yes, there has to be an understanding of our institutions.
Thank you. Mr. Payne?
Something I want to bring up about this is, I had a tremendous opportunity to go and intern when I was in college for Senator Feingold. And I was only able to do that because I was able to live with my brother who was living in D.C. at the time. I think we as Democrats have to start committing to paying our interns as elected officials or people in public service and giving people that come from different walks of life an opportunity to engage and work in their government and observe it. Because too often, the people that go work for Republicans come from more middle-class families, and the people that work for Democrats come from privileged households, and I think that needs to change.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. All right, we'll move on to a question for Mr. Flynn.
Mr. Flynn, you frequently criticize the state's deal with Foxconn. You've pledged to terminate the agreement. How exactly do you plan to do this?
Foxconn is a corrupt deal. It's going to corrupt our budgets for the next 15 years. I'm the only person on the stage who has come out and said that I will stop at litigation in federal court. I've been a commercial litigator and partner at Quarles & Brady for almost 40 years. And here it is in a nutshell. An illegal, unconstitutional contract is unenforceable in Wisconsin. And a piece of legislation, a private bill that benefits one company, is illegal. And you put the two of those together, and this is a stoppable contract, it's rescindable. And they recently, Channel 58, the CBS affiliate in Milwaukee, submitted that to some of the American enterprise scholars of the right wing in this party, and they said Flynn has a point. And here's what it is. If we do not go in and bring an action immediately, if we want to put solar panels on the roof or moan and groan about it, nothing's going to get done. I'm a man of action. I'm going to stop Foxconn.
Mayor Soglin, you wanted to jump in on this question about Foxconn?
Well, I'm probably the only person here of the candidates who's been in the position of having to face this kind of a challenge. That happened back with the Edgewater Hotel. It's very simple. You don't have to sue them. You simply cut off the spigot. You stop the money. And that is what I will do. The money will stop flowing, and then they can either come back to the table and renegotiate, or they can sue us. But we are not going to allow the money to continue to Foxconn.
All right. If no one else wants to jump in, we'll move on to our next question for Mr. McCabe.
Mr. McCabe, I want to ask you what you would do to remove obstacles to voting and to increase voter participation in Wisconsin. But as part of your answer, I'd like you to address the claim made in the letter in today's State Journal that you were being dishonest when you say on your website that you helped start the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign. The letter writer, Denny Caniff, says he recruited you to join the organization a couple of years after it was founded. Please respond.
Well, let me touch on the first part first, Bill. We need to remove voter suppression policies, including voter ID laws. And we also need to move in the other direction and actually embrace things like automatic voter registration. We should be making it easier to vote, not more difficult. Beyond that, what I can say is that I was involved from the beginning in helping as a volunteer to get the democracy campaign up and running. It was founded in 1995. It's actually been reported that I was the founder. I've never claimed that. I simply said that I helped start the group. And as a volunteer, I worked I was present at the very first event called Democracy Day in early 1996, helped raise money for the group to get it off the ground, was then recruited to join the board by Gail Shea, not Denny Kneff, and served on the board, was asked to then join the staff in 99, became director in 2000, led the group as its director for 15 years. So that's the bottom line. What I've said on my campaign website is correct and accurate.
Thank you. Our next question is for Mr. Payne.
Mr. Payne, what specific changes would you seek to increase openness and accountability in Wisconsin's government?
Thank you. I think one of the biggest things that Governor Walker has done that's been bad for our state and our government is the way he's brought it back in cronyism and got rid of accountability in our government. We need to bring back openness. Bring back the ability for ethics investigations to come back to the state of Wisconsin, and that's what I'll do as governor. We need to go further and bring back the civil service system and get rid of the kind of political awarding that's been happening under Governor Walker, and be vigilant in rewarding public service again.
Senator Beinhout, I saw your card first.
Thank you. We need to change the way we do our budgeting process. There's no, for example, public record to what happens once a motion is made before the Finance Committee. You have to subscribe to a private news service to find out what was in that motion and what actually passed. That's wrong. All of this needs to be public. Legislation is like fish. You need to set it out and let the sun shine on it and see if it smells. And that's exactly what has to happen with all of those budget motions and in everything that happens in the budget. It's to lay over for a certain period of time so people can see it.
Thank you, Senator. Superintendent Evers?
In addition to those things, we have to stop appointing political hacks to run the agencies of state government, period. You look back on Walker's record and the people that he's appointed, and they've had to take loyalty oaths. They were told not to speak to the press. We need people that actually run these agencies that know what the heck they're doing. That is one way to really clean house. I think that's really important for us.
Thank you. Our next question is for Representative Royce.
Representative Royce, what specific actions would you take to protect the state's natural resources? And in particular, what changes would you seek to bring to the Department of Natural Resources?
Well, the first and most important thing we need to do is allow the people who work at the DNR to do their jobs, to enforce the laws that are already on the books at the DNR. I also agree with Tony. We need to stop appointing cronies to head our agencies, and specifically the DNR. But we can't have an independent DNR secretary right now because right now the board is controlled by Walker's cronies as well. We need to make sure that DNR scientists are free to speak on proposed legislation, that they are an adequate number of them to actually go out and do the inspections that are necessary to enforce our environmental laws and restore environmental law and order, whether it's protecting clean air and clean water or working with farmers to manage manure. There are a lot of things that DNR does to help all of us and help our industries, from tourism to manufacturing and agriculture. We need to allow the DNR to do that. And we also have to let the DNR be honest about the fact that climate change is real and we need drastic action to address it.
Okay, we'll move on. Or you would like to jump in, Mr. Flynn?
Yes, I would. There are a couple of other things that I would do that are very important. One is that with respect to new mines, I would restore Prove It First and make sure that we weren't letting mines open in the state as we have. The second thing is I've spoken to the Menominee Indians, who are friends of mine, and I've told them that I will join their lawsuit against the EPA that's trying to stop the Back 40 mine on the Menominee River that's going to pour sulfides in. And I will also join Lisa Madigan's suit, the Attorney General of Illinois, who's seeking to stop the waiver of the clean air standards in southeastern Wisconsin for Foxconn.
Senator Vinehout, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. I agree with what's been said, but we need to make sure that we hire back the scientists. We bring back the Bureau of Science Services. We have the scientists post their research on our state websites, and we put them to work dealing with both the effects of climate change and preventing future climate change, solving the problems with CWD, and doing monitoring of water all across the state.
I changed my mind.
Sure. Superintendent Evers.
Sorry about that. And this is a real important topic for me. Science is my background. I got a degree in science from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. It's part of my DNA. But here's a really important issue here, that the party of local control has flipped on this particular issue. Local people do no longer have the ability to take care of their own, whether it's mining or whether it's water or whether it's large capacity farms, big farms. We need to return local control. We need to balance that. We're way out of balance. We sold it off to the business interests.
All right, we'll move on to our next question for Mayor Soglin.
Mayor Soglin, the city of Madison and state of Wisconsin have some of the largest racial disparities in the nation, including when it comes to family income. What would you do as governor to address poverty, both in urban and rural Wisconsin?
First of all, as you know, I believe that there are 5 critical elements that are important to the sustainability of a family, and that if families have access to those 5 critical areas, that in turn not only creates healthy families, but healthy communities, and makes an appreciable difference economically. And we've seen that in the last couple of years here in Madison. But what are the 5? The first one is affordable housing. Affordable housing is critical. Why? Homeless children do not learn in school. If a family is spending 40 or 50% of their income on housing, there's no money for food, for that part of medical costs that they have to incur. Second, transportation. If you can see it and can't get there from here, you got a problem. Quality child care. Public schools, quality education. There's nothing that is as important as time is up. And the last one is health care. Thank you, Kelly.
All right, squeeze it in there. Is there anyone that wants to jump in on that question? All right, well then we'll move on to Senator Vinehout. A question for her.
Senator Vinehout, many of Wisconsin's rural counties are hollowing out. They're losing people. Local economies are hurting. What can be done about this?
Number one, we need broadband. I live with I get broadband by Pony Express. We need to pass the bill that I introduced and that I would put in my first budget called Moving Broadband Forward. It's incredibly important that not only that we make a huge investment, and I'm proposing to pay for $200 million in the first budget in the bill that I wrote. We also need to make sure that the rules that are making it difficult for municipalities to initiate the broadband are removed. Too many barriers have been put in place that make it impossible for towns, cities, or villages to create broadband. We need to make sure that the folks that get the money are accountable for delivering the goods. Just like the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation not promising jobs and not delivering them, the same thing's happening with money going out the door. We need to make sure that everyone has access to what is federally defined as real broadband, not what's in the law now that the Republicans are saying is so great.
Thank you. I saw a card raised from Mayor Soglin.
No, I was just fumbling with them.
All right. Well, that brings us to our next line now. Mr. McCabe, a question about local economies.
I was just going to respond to Here on the importance of bringing high-speed internet to rural areas, absolutely essential. But we need to rebuild rural infrastructure more broadly than just communications infrastructure. We've got rural townships digging up pavement and putting down gravel because they can't afford to fill their potholes. Also, we need to bring health care access to people in rural areas. I grew up on a dairy farm, and I actually wasn't covered by any form of health insurance until the age of 22. Because my family chose to forego insurance in order to be able to keep the farm profitable.
Thank you. Well, we'll move on to our next lightning round here. Hopefully it'll go a little better this time. So just in one sentence, what, in your opinion, is the worst thing that Scott Walker has done as governor of Wisconsin? One sentence, and we'll just go down the line. Superintendent Evers.
When he said, "I'm the education governor."
All right, simmer down. Mr. Flynn.
His decision to go into politics in the first place.
Mr. McCabe.
His desire to divide and conquer people and pit one population of people in Wisconsin against other people.
Mr. Payne.
His selling out of Wisconsin interests to people like the Koch brothers and the Koch industries and putting the needs of those corporations ahead of the needs of the people.
Representative Royce.
Well, his best and worst decision was to run for president because it showed us that he never cared about us, right? He always put himself first, and it showed the country what a terrible leader he is.
Mayor Soglin.
Oh, so many choices.
One sentence.
Thinking he could submit a budget in the best interest of the people of this state.
Senator Vineham.
Well, it's the combination of Act 10 and his first budget, because what he did was devastating to the state. Yes, the result was divide and conquer, but he cut veterans programs, such as school milk. He cut school breakfast. An unbelievable number of people were hurt by that first budget.
Thank you. And now on to our third round of questions for our Democratic candidates for governor. Our first question is for Superintendent Evers from Bill Lueders, Managing Editor of the Progressive Magazine.
Superintendent Evers, the Wisconsin State Journal reported that you declined to state a position on banning assault weapons. Time's up, right here, right now. Do you support a ban on the sale and possession of these weapons? What else would you do as governor to curb gun violence?
Yes, I would support a ban on assault weapons. I would support the making semi-automatic weapons into assault weapons with bump stocks. Most importantly, and this is a critical issue for the state of Wisconsin, we need to have an accomplishment here. We have young people all across this country, and including in our state, that went to our public schools that are really doing citizenship, as we talked about before. They want us to do something productive. And I can tell you 80% of the people of the state of Wisconsin have said universal background checks is supported. That includes people that hunt, that includes the anglers, that includes people that are absolutely anti-gun. We need to start with something that everybody can agree on, and that's where we should start. Universal background checks, waiting periods, making sure that the people that shouldn't have guns don't have guns.
Any candidates that want to jump in on that one? Well, then we'll move on to Mr. Flynn.
Mr. Flynn, if you are elected, what would you do regarding the state's program to fund private schools through the voucher program? Would you work to end this program, or do you think some vouchers should continue?
No, I would freeze the expansion statewide and bring it back. There are kids in this pipeline, obviously, going to have to finish their educations. This program was started in Milwaukee in the early 90s to desegregate Milwaukee schools. Milwaukee has among the most segregated schools, maybe the most in the country. And then it spread to Racine, and that was the initial purpose. And I think it was well-intentioned but flawed because it didn't work out that way. And a lot of kids suddenly thought they were going to get a better education in a voucher school, and they don't. So my position very bluntly is freeze its expansion and bring it back, accommodating the kids that are in the pipeline.
Our next question is for Mr. McCabe.
Mr. McCabe, we were so close to having high-speed rail between Madison, Chicago, Minneapolis before the governor, Scott Walker, he turned down the hundreds of millions of dollars in federal aid for the project. If you were elected governor, would you try to get that project back on track? How would you do that?
I absolutely would try to resuscitate high-speed rail, and I would reach out to Illinois and Minnesota and try to forge a three-state partnership to see if we can't do this together, to connect the Twin Cities to Chicago via high-speed rail corridor that should go right through the heart of Wisconsin. Not only was it a tragic mistake to turn down that $800 million and forego all the economic development opportunity that would have occurred along that entire corridor, but think also about the huge loss in Milwaukee when Talgo, the Italian train maker, was going to build train engines at the old A.O. Smith plant and employ something like 1,400 people. in a distressed neighborhood, and those neighbors are within walking distance of that old plant. It could have helped revitalize that community. It would have put people to work with good family supporting jobs. It was a huge missed opportunity, not only for our state as a whole, but for a distressed part of our biggest city in Wisconsin.
Representative Royce, so you have 30 seconds.
Yeah. So yes, and we absolutely do need to get high-speed rail connection that puts us in touch with Chicago and the Twin Cities. This is important not just for our economy, but because we need Wisconsin to be a vibrant state. And that means we can't have young people moving away. We need to attract younger people to live here and raise their families. So we have to do more transit investments. We have to address the student loan debt crisis, affordable childcare, paid family leave. That's how we're going to make Wisconsin's economy vibrant and growing, by making sure people want to live here and raise their families.
Thank you. Next question is for Mr. Payne.
Mr. Payne, our neighbor, Minnesota, ranks #1 in the nation when it comes to per capita arts funding, while Wisconsin, under Walker, has plunged to number 47. What would you do as governor to promote the arts and to support artists?
Thank you. I appreciate that. Art is very important. It's important for us all as communities. It brings people into our communities. It grows the economy. It's connected to having a vibrant education. You know, getting a well education is more than just learning math and science. It's also getting art. It develops your whole brain. Part of my education growing up was I learned to play piano, and I believe that encouraged it. So as governor, I'll restore funding to the arts. I think we need to bring back percentage for the arts in our building permit system. And then finally, promoting the arts throughout all of our communities, showcasing them, being, as governor, a salesperson for arts in Wisconsin and going through and awarding in different communities artists that are showcasing what they're doing.
Mr. Flynn, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah, I just want to share a personal experience. I was the president of the board of the Skylight Opera Theater in Milwaukee. I was on the Milwaukee Symphony Board. I was the president of the Milwaukee Shakespeare Board. And I've written 2 novels, 2 satires. So look them up. This is a plug. I would like you to buy them. But beyond that, the arts are incredibly important to a community. And at the Skylight, the thing I was most proud of is there's no music program in inner city school. We taught the kids how to write an opera. People said, Matt, why would you try to teach them to write an opera? Why not? You know, I mean, the fact of the matter is there are a lot of talented kids in that school.
Thank you. Our next question is for Representative Royce.
Representative Royce, a recent survey shows Americans to be split pretty evenly on the support for the idea of a universal public income. This is the idea of a basic stipend paid to people who lose their jobs to automation. It could replace or change welfare programs. Would you support such an idea of universal basic income for Wisconsinites?
You know, I'm a tech entrepreneur since leaving the state assembly, and this is something that gets a lot of discussion in tech circles. I think we should have experimentation and innovation. We have to understand that the economy is changing. Our parents' and grandparents' economy is not coming back where you work for 40 years for the same company and then get a gold watch. Now we have people coming out, not starting at zero, but starting at negative 30,000 or negative 50,000 because of student loan debt. We have people who go in and get jobs, but they don't have benefits. So we do have to decouple benefits like health insurance, like the ability to invest in a secure public pension system, like paid family leave, from employment. And I think that an experimentation with UBI, Universal Basic Income, could be really important. I think we also should look around the developed world and see how other communities are using UBI and take what works. That's how I developed my paid family leave program, by seeing what other states are doing that's successful and emulating it.
Mr. McCabe, you said you wanted to jump in on this one?
Yeah, I actually have been the one candidate in the race who has said that Wisconsin should become the first state in the nation to do a small-scale experiment with universal basic income. Bottom line is that we are watching more and more vulnerable workers see their employment automated out of existence. Robots are here, more are coming. Eventually driverless vehicles, they're on their way as well. We have got to deal with that reality and create financial stability and economic security for vulnerable workers. To do an experiment in Wisconsin with a basic income program is a critically important step to dealing with that vulnerability.
Mr. Payne, 30 seconds.
Thank you. Actually, I've been talking about UBI significantly on the trail. I have both an economics and a tax background, and I think Wisconsin can begin the path towards UBI. I think I've been proposing not the initial stage of where everyone just gets the first full scope guaranteed income, but what we do is we can do it through the tax code and rework it. And what we need to do is develop a system of policies that sets people at a target rate for what their income should be, and then work with companies and do guarantees that help people get to that level. So that's in conjunction with having wage insurance as a supplement to unemployment insurance. And also, sorry, I'm out of time. It's a very complex issue, but it's a package of programs.
Our next question is for Madison Mayor Paul Soglin.
Mayor Soglin, over the years you have done and said things that have alienated potential allies.
No.
One recent example is when you called Madison alderpersons who negotiated a road maintenance deal with the county that you don't like traitorous.
They were.
How do you defend the use of such inflammatory rhetoric? What does it accomplish?
One of the things that's marked my political career is refusing to share in what some folks call a professional courtesy to other politicians. Sometimes members of the council have asked me not to throw them under the bus. I don't enjoy doing it, but I think my obligation is to the people I represent. It's to the people of the city of Madison. If I'm governor, it's the state of Wisconsin and all the folks from one end of the state to the other. It is more important to honor the trust that they put in you rather than be silent when elected officials make mistakes and do things that are horrible public policy or are contradictory. How the hell somebody can get up there and say, I'm for equity and I'm for social justice, and put all this money into police and fire stations and not have anything left for community centers and schools is beyond me.
Thank you. Our next question is for Senator Vinehout.
Senator Vinehout. While senator, you voted against 2 individuals appointed to the UW Hospital and Clinics Authority Board who had supported a proposal to offer late-term abortions at the Madison Surgery Clinic. Were you opposed to the idea of the hospital offering the service?
No, absolutely not. I've voted on thousands of appointments over the years. There are many, many, many reasons why a legislator would vote against an appointment. This was an issue that some Republicans wanted to make into a choice issue, or an abortion issue, but the reasons I had were totally different.
So what were the reasons you had against for voting against those 2 appointments?
We have a long time has elapsed, so we're talking about a vote back in 2009. As I said, I've taken thousands of votes on appointments. We usually vote on appointments for maybe 30, 40 at a time. So I'm going to guess, if I went back at my notes, I would probably have written down this person answered a question in a hearing, and the answer told me that that person was not qualified for the job. That's the most frequent reason why I vote against an appointment, is they absolutely did not know what it was they needed to know to be able to do what it is. And this is an issue I see all the time in the appointments that come forward in the Capitol.
All right, before our next lightning round here, we'll pause 5 seconds for station identification for our radio stations broadcasting live around the state. We can all take a deep breath together while we wait. All right, that's it. It's not long. We're back. Welcome back to our Democratic forum for the gubernatorial candidates here. Our final lightning round question this evening. If you were on the ballot, hold on. If you were not on the ballot, which other candidate on this stage would you vote for and why? And you have 30 seconds each, starting with Superintendent Evers.
Oh, Lord. I was the one that said I was the only one. I've known Kathleen Vinehout for many, many years. I appreciate the work that she's done on our school funding formula. She's a champion for that. That's who I would choose.
Mr. Flynn?
If I weren't on the ballot, I would vote for Paul Soglin.
Mr. McCabe?
I would have to say that Kathleen understands that we can't get a new governor without winning in places outside of Madison and Milwaukee. We have to win in places that used to vote for Democrats but stopped. It's something that is important to me, and she not only understands that, but has great experience winning in rural Wisconsin.
Mr. Payne?
If I was on the ballot, I would.
You are on the ballot. Don't make the same mistake I did.
Okay.
So if you weren't on the ballot.
If I weren't on the ballot, I would probably vote for Kelda, because we need a new generation of leaders stepping up, and I'm glad to be on the stage with her.
Representative Royce?
Well, now I think I should say I would vote for Josh Payne, because I agree. We do need a new generation of leaders. And I would probably vote for Paul Soglin, because I think it would be really fun to watch it. He's antagonized me sometimes, but that's okay.
Mr. Mayor?
I'm not going to answer the question other than to say if I was not on the ballot, I would write in myself.
All right, Senator Ryan.
Well, Tony, I'm right back at you. I've been Tony's fan for a long time, and we've worked on a lot of issues related to schools and tried to make progress, and we need the votes to get it done right now.
Thanks, Kathy.
All right, let's give him a brief round of applause. Okay, on to our final round of questions, which were submitted by members of the public. Judy Davidoff will start us off with a question for Superintendent Evers.
Superintendent Evers, if you were elected governor, what Wisconsin administration policy would you try to reverse first, and how would you get the cooperation of the state legislature?
The thing that I would reverse first, well, first of all, I've been fighting Scott Walker on administrative rules for the 10 years I've been state superintendent, so I get how important that is. But I'm going to shift a little bit. I think where we need some real leadership and change is on the Foxconn deal itself. We're a little, there's some differences whether it's going to go away or not, but if it stays, we absolutely need to have that company be just like the contentious Milwaukee Bucks conversation. It was about the Bucks owners said, we're going to hire women owners and minority owners and apprentices and workers, and they met all the benchmarks. Foxconn has no benchmarks. They should be doing the exact same thing. We're having a huge, obnoxious investment in this company. We need to have the people that are struggling in the state participate in it. That's what I would work on.
Thank you. Mr. Flynn, I saw your card first.
Yeah, with all respect, I think it's absurd to fight over the deck furniture in the Titanic. If Foxconn is not eliminated, that's $4.5 billion over 15 years. And they're exempted from our Court of Appeals jurisdiction, our wetlands laws, our environmental impact statement. That has got to go down. If they want to stay in this state with no tax dollars obeying all our laws, okay, they can do it. But we're not going to shilly-shally around and put tiles on the roof and look at their hiring practices. They're not going to have any hiring practices after me. They expect federal tax dollars.
Thank you. Representative Royce?
Thank you. The first thing that I would do is deliver on health care, because that is the issue that I hear about everywhere in the state. I would take the federal Medicaid expansion dollars, I would set up an exchange under the Affordable Care Act and make Badger Care a public option. Because as a small business owner, I know that this is an economic issue, and as a mom, I understand the anxiety that people feel if they don't have affordable health insurance, whether it's access to reproductive health care, mental health care, or the high cost of prescription drugs. I've got comprehensive plans for this on my website. This is a moral issue, but it's also an economic emergency for our state.
Mayor Soglin.
The first thing I did when I was elected mayor in 1973 was to legalize outdoor dining at Madison restaurants. I make the point that you want to do something quickly and decisively. The very first thing I would do is send a memo to DNR and copy it to the other state agencies saying climate change and global warming are back in your vocabulary. The second thing I would do is I'd put out an executive order on rights for the entire LGBTQ community and make sure every state agency understood it.
Thank you. Senator Weinhaupt?
We have a crisis among state employees right now. The first thing that I would do is repeat the employee satisfaction survey that was done by the Legislative Audit Bureau that showed that 75% of the people that work at King Veteran Home said that worker morale is bad. 40% said they were going to look for a job in the next 6 months. If we're going to do anything in state government, we've got to have a team that's engaged and ready to go. And that is day number one, what I would do as governor.
Thank you, Senator. Our next question is for Mr. Flynn.
Mr. Flynn, as our license plates say, Wisconsin is America's dairy land. Yet we lead the nation in farm bankruptcies. Farmers are telling us they can't stay in business due to prices. What can be done about this?
Right. I did a video with Mike Fried of Frieder's Jerseys in Sussex in Waukesha County yesterday. An old friend of mine is a dairy farmer, and he milks about 70 cows. And we talked about this very issue. Right now, it's a matter of oversupply. You have CAFOs coming in, and they have 5,000 cow farms, and the small people are getting squeezed out. In addition, he's driving truck and his son's driving truck just to make ends meet. And there's an old joke that says a lawyer and a farmer each win $1 million in the lottery. The lawyer says, I'm going to put it at 10% interest. The farmer says, well, I guess I'll just keep farming till it's all gone. So the fact of the matter is that you got to do this. We need broadband around the state, obviously. We need to cure the oversupply problem, and that means restricting CAFOs, restoring local control. And then ultimately, milk is so low right now, I think we have to fight Trump on his tariffs and have a governor who stands up for farmers. Right. But ultimately, there's a private market. And if we can't restrict oversupply, that's going to continue to happen.
Thank you. Mayor Soglin.
Everything that Matt Flynn said, and one more thing. We have to correct one of the disasters that was deliberately caused by Scott Walker, who has a fixation, a fetish with numbers and doing things really big quantitatively, but not qualitatively. And that's when he decided he wanted to see Wisconsin milk producers set records in terms of production, which we did. And that, of course, led to this great supply, and that in turn has led to the bankruptcies. The state created the problem. We've got to go back, and we have to fix it for those farmers.
Thank you. Our next question is for Mr. McCabe.
A number of people who contacted us urged us to ask questions about climate change. So, Mr. McCabe, what would you do as governor to address this problem?
Well, the first thing we got to do is put it back on the DNR's website. Any mention of it was scrubbed from the agency's website that's supposed to protect our environment. So that's first and foremost. But I think Wisconsin needs to aim to become the first state in America fully powered by renewable energy. That's got to be our goal. And right now we're lagging badly in that race. We're not even seriously competing in that race. And we've got to set our goals high. That's not only the right thing to do for our environment and for our planet, it's the right thing to do for our economy. If we could just get ourselves to the Midwest average in producing clean energy jobs, that's 30,000 more people who would be employed in that sector of our economy in Wisconsin. So, Foxconn is asking us to put 4.5 billion eggs in one basket in exchange for a promise of maybe up to 13,000 jobs. Get to the Midwest average in producing clean energy employment, that's 30,000 more jobs for Wisconsin.
Mr. Payne.
Thank you. In addition to making Wisconsin 100% renewable, we need to set big goals on making Wisconsin a leader in environmental innovation. So right now, Toyota is experimenting with a hydrogen-powered semi-truck in California that uses manure to be converted, methane emissions converted to hydrogen to fuel that truck. I met with some people working on that. I said, I know a place that has a lot of manure. I think we need to repeal the extra fee for hybrid vehicles and make alternative vehicles the mainstream vehicle and support the infrastructure for that.
Anyone else want to weigh on climate change quick? All right, then we'll move on to Mr. Payne. Oh, we just said, Mr. Payne, right?
Yes. Mr. Payne, what would your plan be to fix Wisconsin's roads, and how would you pay for it?
Thank you. we were talking about the first thing that the governor needs to do. One of them is roads. Wisconsin's last in the country in new business growth, and part of that is our overall infrastructure going behind. It's not safe to be on our roads. Our communities are struggling. We need to fix it. We need a long-term sustainable path to have safe roads and have well-paved roads. As far as paying for it, I think everything is on the table. We need to look at how we spend our money to make sure that we're building roads that don't need to be constantly repaired to begin with. We need to make sure that we're not using debt service as a part of our gas tax so that local communities are strapped to just filling potholes. And then further, we need to look at coordinating with development to ensure that, when something like a Foxconn or a big development comes in, that we're supporting the infrastructure around that and holding those companies to be a part of that infrastructure investment.
All right, it's time. Senator Vinehout on roads.
The former Secretary of Transportation put together a 600-page budget, and in it he had 24 different ideas on how to raise revenue. I read the whole thing, and I was fascinated to learn that the state, us as taxpayers, own 624 miles of state-owned railroad. And he suggested a modest $10 a car fee every time that rail line was traveled over. This is a no-brainer, and it's one of many options that the governor's own secretary put together.
Our next question is for Representative Royce.
Representative Royce, you touched on this earlier, but what is your plan to expand access for health care in Wisconsin, and how would you pay for it?
Well, I think we need to make Badger Care a public option, make it possible for individuals and employers, small business owners like myself, to buy into that. We need to obviously accept the federal Medicaid expansion dollars. We need to make sure that we're funding organizations that provide health care. So for instance, Planned Parenthood, that's a healthcare provider of last resort for thousands of women, men across this state. And our governor has defunded them. We have other community health clinics that need to be funded, and we should also aggressively go after federal funds. One of the things that doesn't get talked about enough is the fact that there aren't enough providers that will accept Badger Care or public insurance because the reimbursement rates are so low. We could capture more federal dollars, match them, while increasing the number of providers available in places across the state that don't have a lot of healthcare options by raising the reimbursement rates and then getting more people who are covered by Badger Care to have higher quality coverage so that more people want to buy in, and it lowers the rates for all the rest of us.
Thank you. Our next question is for Mayor Soglin.
Mayor Soglin, don't worry, this one is from the public, so it's a relative softball. What would you do to undo the damage that Governor Walker has done to public education?
Start out with the same thing that I've repeated over and over again since I was first elected to office in the 1970s. A community is only as strong as its public school system. That is so critical. So one of the things we do, and we start with, is proper funding. School districts and schools are based on three things: the quality of the teaching staff, the ratio of teachers to students, and parental involvement. We've got to tackle all three of those. And that starts with funding so that we can attract the best faculty and so we can get the right student-teacher ratios in the classroom. Second thing we do is we understand the purpose of education is not a career and a technical job. The purpose of an education, and every educator knows this, is to teach young people how to think, which scares the hell out of Scott Walker.
Representative Royce, running out of time for those cards, folks. So Representative Royce.
Yes. You can't value education if you don't value the educators who provide it. And we have a crisis in our education system, separate from the funding crisis and the inequitable distribution. And it's the fact that teachers are leaving the profession. They are demoralized. Their professional autonomy is being taken away. They are being disrespected by our leaders. We need to restore that. And the way to do it is not to lower standards for teachers. It's to bring teachers back to the classroom and let them teach. Let them be free from the mandatory testing and all of the interference from politicians.
Superintendent Evers.
Spent the last 10 years fighting Scott Walker on this very issue. We can change this. First of all, the divide and conquer mantra has to stop. It is like Donald Trump tweeting. What leaders say is what happens in the classroom. We have to stop that. Second of all, we have to provide the resources to make sure they happen. But I have to go back to Act 10. One of the intended consequences there was to A, have people leave the profession, B, to have less young people enter the profession, and C, they're trying to dumb down the qualifications to be a teacher. We have to change that, and I know we can do that going forward.
Thank you. Mr. Payne?
First thing as governor is I won't be hostile to my Secretary of Public Instruction. And then the second thing is we need to understand that education reform doesn't end at the school walls. We need to invest in our communities, and we need to invest in early childhood development. For every $1 we invest in early childhood development, we save as a state, or save $7 in that child later in life. So we need to start focusing on making sure that before they even enter the school, those children are prepared to be educated.
All right, our final question this evening is to Senator Vinehouse. Oh, maybe Mr. Sorry, Mr. McCabe?
No, not a problem.
Okay.
Amen to the other remarks, but I do have to say I think the biggest thing that we could do for our schools is to keep state and national politicians as far away from them as possible. Educators were trained how to evaluate student performance. They don't need politicians testing kids to death just in order to give themselves more ammunition to attack educators and schools. We have seen over 130 laws made in Wisconsin just since 2011, taking away local community decision-making authority. We have to restore local democracy, restore community authority to make some choices again.
Anyone else? All right, then our last question is for Senator Vinehouse.
Senator Vinehouse, we're seeing a steady decline of traditional sporting heritage activities in Wisconsin, activities like hunting, fishing, and trapping. What would you do to ensure that wildlife watchers, silent sports enthusiasts, and other non-consumptive outdoorsmen and women have a voice in Wisconsin's conservation efforts?
Thank you for the question. What we need to do is to restore the voice of the Conservation Congress, which has been around since 1935. And the governor, at the very beginning, in a little-known bill called Act 21, took away the ability of the average person to be able to go to their county, vote and talk about an issue, and have that issue go directly to the Natural Resources Board. Yes, we need the Natural Resources Board to make the decision on who it is that's going to be our Natural Resources Secretary, but we need the voice of the people. This is why we live in Wisconsin, for our natural resources, and we need to preserve them with everything that we have, which means everybody needs to be involved in it. There's so much that can be done by funding the Department of Natural Resources and giving them the ability to speak out in hearings, giving people the ability to listen to them and ask questions. But let's start with the voice of the people through the Conservation Congress.
Thank you, Senator. We've reached the time now for closing statements. You each have 90 seconds. We'll go down the line, starting with Superintendent Evers.
Well, thanks so much for everybody for being here tonight. It's been a great opportunity to share our wisdom with you and listen to your wisdom by answering great questions. I have to end by talking about myself, why you should vote for me. First of all, I've won 3 statewide races. And the last time I won with 70% of the vote, and I won in 70 of 72 counties. And that I've never lost a county in northern Wisconsin or central Wisconsin. That is an important part of this race in beating Scott Walker. In addition, I've lived all across central Wisconsin. I was born and raised in Plymouth. I'm a proud progressive from Plymouth, Panther. And started my career in Toma. I lived all across the central part of the state in addition to the Fox Valley. Third of all, I've actually run things. I'm running a state agency right now that's ultimately responsible for the education of 860,000 kids and the 100,000 adults that work there. There is no assembly required for me on day one. I can guarantee you that. Now, I'll also tell you in my last 30 seconds that this race will not be won just bashing Scott Walker. Yes, we're going to hold him accountable. He has done many things that have hurt our state. But We have the issues, and they're about Wisconsin values, education, natural resources, good health care, making sure that we have great infrastructure in the state so that everybody can enjoy life in a way that we have in the past. Those are Wisconsin values, and we're going to win on those because they are not Scott Walker's. Thank you.
Mr. Flynn.
Yeah, thank you very much. I've enjoyed being here tonight. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a Navy veteran, and I'm a former chairman of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin. And I want to leave you with this thought. There's only going to be one of us on the stage with Scott Walker in October. Only one. A lot of good people here. But if we don't beat him, the University of Wisconsin is going to get strangled. And Act 10 will be deeply embedded in law, and there will be a new reapportionment until 2030 that will destroy the state. So regardless of whom you may like or not like, I think the question I ask you to consider is this. Who can beat him? Who, in effect, can hit a home run in the bottom of the ninth? I think I'm that person. And by demeanor, by ability, by experience, if we nominate somebody, a good person, who praised his education budget, who said it was kid-friendly, who said that it reflected his budget priorities, when I know it was a crooked budget, it was a Alex budget, it was a Koch brothers budget. That's not a contrast. It gives the appearance of Republican light. We need a very aggressive, articulate candidate who's going to get up there and eviscerate him on the stage. When I served in the Navy, I defended my country. When I served as a lawyer, I defended my clients. When I serve as governor, I'll defend you. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Evers, if you want to take
rebuttal.
to respond.
I need to respond to that cheap shot at the end here. My budget was absolutely pro-kid. And the reason I said that is because Scott Walker adopted that budget, almost 90% of it. That's why I said that, and I'll never back off from that. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing now and asking for even larger increases. Republican light, frankly, that is an outrageous comment from somebody that I respect. We can win this race without this type of diatribe. I can tell you that right now.
Mr. Flynn, if you want to respond very quickly about why that's not.
I do. I didn't mention any names, so I'm surprised you got a response.
Well, you looked right at me and pointed at me, so that's part of the deal.
Who is going to beat this guy? My friend Tony here said, well, I will ask him, how can you say you're the education governor when you did this, that, and the other thing? If you ask an open question to a liar, to Scott Walker, he'll have you for lunch. You need somebody who knows how to ask a leading question and take them apart.
All right, thank you, Mr. Flynn. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. McCabe.
Wisconsin used to be known from coast to coast as a beacon of clean and open and honest government, and we can't lay claim to that reputation anymore today because we've allowed cronyism and corruption and what amounts to legal bribery to take root in our state. Wisconsin always was an industrial powerhouse as well. And so far in the 21st century, no state in America has seen its middle class shrink more than Wisconsin. If you are a minimum wage worker, you need 3 jobs. 2 full-time jobs will not do in order to afford housing. We have levels of economic inequality now in our state not seen since the Great Depression. Why? Because Wisconsin has been feeding the rich. We've been showering tax breaks and state subsidies on a few at the top with the hopes that they would work some magic for the rest of us. We have got to do an about face and use our resources to empower regular working people from the ground up. We need to embrace geyser economics. Economic prosperity does not trickle down, it gushes up. But we will only get that if we have a government that works for all of us and not simply a wealthy and well-connected and privileged few at the very top. My life's work has been about exposing big money influence in politics and corruption in our government. We need to cure the cancer that is growing in the body of democracy if we are going to have a government befitting the state of Wisconsin.
Please hold your response to your applause to the end, Mr. Payne.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming out tonight. It is so wonderful to see people engaged and wanting to see their state change. And I got into politics and policy because my family struggled. I lost my dad when I was growing up, and I saw my mom struggle as a single mom, and then saw her pass away from lung cancer without being a smoker. So bad policy, bad politics impacted my family. I was given the tremendous opportunity to live and work across the state of Wisconsin, from places like Green Bay to rural places like Stanley. And I've met all these communities. I got into this because the conversation shouldn't be why we can win, it should be why we should win. And that starts with real policies and going out and credibly selling it to every place in the state of Wisconsin. Far too many people feel like they're being left behind. Far too many people feel like they're not being listened to. I was speaking to a farmer last week, and the very first thing I said to him when he said, "What are you going to do for us?" I said, "The first thing I'm going to do is I want to listen to you. You tell me what you need, because we need to empower people again. Too many people are not feeling empowered. We have so many great ideas, so many big goals. It's not going to happen unless we bring people together and set that goal and figure out the best way to get there. And that's good policy and good politics. It's about empowering people and bringing back the Wisconsin idea across the state of Wisconsin. If you give me that chance, I'll stand up next to Scott Walker and bring that kind of credibility. And as governor, I will make that happen for the state of Wisconsin.
Representative Royce.
Thank you. It's great to be with you tonight. I'm Kelda Royce, and I'm running for governor because I love Wisconsin. And I know we can be a place of opportunity and fairness again. We can be the best state to raise a family, the best place to grow a business. And as I travel around the state, I am filled, despite the tough time that we're in, I am filled with hope and optimism, because people everywhere are ready for change. They're ready to turn the page on the negativity and the division that we've had. We're ready to be the public education state again, a state that is a leader in healthcare, has the best roads. So when you drive to the border in Illinois, you say, "These roads are terrible," instead of the other way around. We can do that. I've got a track record of turning these great progressive ideas we have into real results. I was a legislative leader. I helped lead the fight against Act 10. I helped pass the first pro-choice law in a generation in this state through an anti-choice Republican-controlled assembly when I was the executive director of a statewide reproductive rights organization. I'm a mom and a stepmom of 4 girls, so I'm deeply invested in the future of our state. But most of all, I have the energy and the experience, and we've built a campaign that can win in November. Because Republicans, they vote all the time. They vote consistently. But Democrats, we have to feel inspired to go vote. We don't show up unless we're excited about the candidate. And don't you want to vote for someone and not just against something? That's what our campaign has built week after week, month after month. We have done the hard work. I'm campaigning full time. I am raising the resources that we need to win, not just getting excitement from people here in Wisconsin, but all over the country that are going to turn Wisconsin blue again. Thank you.
Mayor Soglin.
I'm not going to give you the 1-hour summation. I'm going to give you the 5-second summation. Before I entered this race, we spent $35,000 on a poll to answer the critical question, can I win statewide? And the answer is a convincing yes by 10 points by the pollster, Paul Maslin, who did the Jones campaign, the U.S. Senate campaign in Alabama. You can read his summation on our website. Second thing, a lot of people talk. There's 3 ways of addressing a problem. You describe what's wrong, you describe a solution, and you solve it. I have made a career out of solving problems, tough problems, and you can see the consequences. This city may not be perfect, but I did it in the environment of 2 of the questions that was asked of me. 2 of the questions focused on my relationship with the legislature and my relationship with local politicians. Too many people elected to office get coerced, get co-opted, get socialized in forgetting who they represent, the ordinary people of a community, the people who don't on every daily basis check the blog and check the wires and check everything else. That's your obligation. And if other politicians fail, you can't stand by while the people of the state see their futures sold out, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Senator Vinehout.
Thank you. All across Wisconsin, people are hurting. We heard about the dairy farmers, the minimum wage jobs. Wisconsin's wages are 18th worst in the United States of any other state. And when I think about the folks that I'm here to run for, our campaign has been all about putting people first. And I think about Rachel in Racine, working a minimum wage job, a son who has mental health problems. She needs to go to the tech college to improve her skills. She needs transit to get home. She needs safe streets. And she needs a governor who is going to think about her and her problems every single day when that governor wakes up. Most of the problems that we've talked about today would be solved in the state budget. We've heard a lot about slogans. Medicare for all, for example, is a slogan. Repeal and replace is a slogan. But in order to make a difference for the Rachels of the state, we need to turn those slogans into policies. And that's what the last 12 years, almost 12 years of my life has been about. Finding and reading the audits, knowing the details, knowing where the bones are buried, knowing the recommendations that the governor has had and has not taken. Being able to balance the budget with the same dollars and accomplish things like putting Rachel first.
Thank you, Senator. Let's give all our candidates a big round of applause. The primary election is Tuesday, August 14th. Polls are open from 7 to 8 p.m. Don't forget to vote. Good night.